Welcome to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes a show business. Find us all across social media and help the show grow. Facebook.com/That Business Show. We're getting a great, community established through the fan page there. Though there are about 4,600 likes and a lot of different content being posted on that page each and every day, from past show recaps to the live episodes each and every morning that we stream through the Facebook live video feed, and also just upcoming events. We always put the programs that are coming up for the week up as events on the Facebook fan page now. So that's a little bit of a change that we didn't used to do for people that are familiar with this show going back to my radio show days. I'm able to do that now because shows are pre-recorded versus being live. When I was live, all I knew was who was coming in the studio. Didn't necessarily know what it is that we were going to talk about. Sometimes I didn't even know what it is that they do until they get into the studio, because I had different people booking the program. And to date, we've interviewed over 1,200 different professionals, over 1,600 different interviews, and just a ton of content available all across social media, all across of our different sites, on iTunes, on YouTube. Every show, both with an audio and a video file on the program. So whether it is that you like to listen on your podcast player, or whether you like to watch it on video, we make it available to you on demand, however it is convenient for you. We've also put a link up on the homepage of thatbusinessnetwork.com for people that have Android devices. Now you can subscribe via one click on your Android device. A lot of people that use iTunes can easily subscribe to shows a lot of times, because people post the subscribe on iTunes links. But on an Android device, iTunes doesn't work for podcast players. There's the Apple Music app, but right now it doesn't access the podcast, or at least I've not seen it do that. If I'm wrong, please somebody correct me. But for Android applications, click on that, and it's a number of different podcast players that you can utilize for listening to the program on your Android device. Castbox is just one of those apps that I recommend and use to listen to the program. There's also TuneIn or Player FM. Those have apps available for the program. And here very soon we'll be developing our own app specific to the program. Just one of the many services that you can get done for your show. This being talking to podcasters out there through Libsyn. A simple application can be developed. It takes about 6 weeks or so for them to build that at a very minimal charge. And so just another benefit of using services such as Libsyn to get your podcast out to the masses. Also, please leave a review and please subscribe, download some episodes, listen to some of the older content. It helps the program grow, and we're doing everything we can to increase the visibility of the program, because we want to get the message of the entrepreneurs and business professionals out to the community. On today's program, I want to talk a little bit about a social issue that came out this past week, social/political issue, and that was the return of Otto Warmbier to the country in a coma, and now ultimately died. People that weren't familiar with this when it happened, it was something that I actually had been following for the past year when it occurred, although little to no information came out of the country since his detainment over a year ago. But North Korea is one of those countries that, to me, it's fascinating in what kind of culture that regime has created, and it's a real problem for our society. And in the coming years, it's probably going to be our next war, unfortunately. And you hear more and more in the news about how to handle North Korea, the dictatorship that has evolved now over 3 generations in the country. It's quite a scary scenario, because it's a cult of personality in which every person in that country has been brainwashed to believe that their leader, Kim Jong-un now, is a god. And when people talk in just everyday life, when people come into the country and interview people, it's so strange to hear them say, with everything they say, they praise their great leader. It's just nothing they say is devoid of anything positive to say about their leader. And this goes back to the Korean War. This all started after the Korean War, in which the two countries, South Korea and North Korea, were split along the 59, 90, with some parallel line across the country, the demilitarized zone. To this day, you've got forces on both the south end and the north end that are standing opposed to one another, just waiting for somebody to fire a shot and continue the war, which has never been ceased. The war, those two countries are still technically as war because a treaty was never officially signed. Something was assigned to stall the war. I don't know what the proper terms are right there, but the war is still actually in effect. And at that time, Kim Il-sung came into power, and he began to build this cult of personality. And a whole lot is, I mean, actually not too much is known even about the development of the culture post-Korean War and how it came together. There's just so little information that comes out of that country, and that's so much of the mystique and the allure of what's been going on in there, is how they are able and have been able to contain information and both in and out of the country, where in return the entire global economy is essentially merged. But this one tiny little area, off the Asian peninsula right there, has amassed this cult of personality in which everybody is brainwashed to believe that this one bloodline is the end-all, say-all of things. The country has a powerful army too, and that's what the scary part of this whole situation with North Korea entails. They have over 1.5 million people in the army, and if you've seen the videos of them marching through the streets and them parading their missiles through the streets, they pump all of their resources and all of their everything they've got into the military, and so many of their own countrymen are suffering. There was a famine in the 1990s which wiped out a large portion of the population. People to this day continue to suffer from starvation and thirst in the country. They have very little food coming into the country. They really have no diplomatic relationships with anybody in the globe or on the earth, with the exception of China. And that's really the only pull that America and other countries have to kind of rein in North Korea, is by trying to influence China to employ some type of economic hardship or a thing onto them whereby that would stall their economy. Without China, North Korea would have no trade partners. But other than that, they have no relationships with America. And so the situation with Otto Warmbier, people are like, we should do this, we should do that. There's nothing more that we can do. They're completely cut off diplomatically from the United States. And so the only option that we could do is a military strike, which would then open a can of worms unlike anything we have probably ever seen. We are fortunate that we're far enough away from North Korea that it's unlikely they could strike us. There's talk that, Kim Jong-un puts out that, he has a missile that could strike Los Angeles, but it's probably still several years away before he has a missile that could strike Los Angeles accurately. He might be able to strike Los Angeles, with maybe a 1 in 10 chance. But it's with our missile defense capabilities and our military, I'm not too concerned about a strike from North Korea on the United States. But what does concern me is that the Winter Olympics are in Seoul this coming winter. We're going to have Americans and countries, some 50 miles from Pyongyang, and who knows if Kim Jong-un has something planned for the Winter Olympics. They've also got one of our allies just right across the bay from them, Japan. They could easily strike Japan, and they are constantly testing missile after missile after missile. The missile tests are tenfold what they were under Kim Jong-il, the last leader of the country. And now, in just the last couple of years, Kim Jong-un, this 28, 29-year-old nut job who is now in control of this country, and we don't even really know his influences and his wants and his desires inside of this country. And it's going to be very interesting to see how America responds to North Korea, especially Donald Trump in power, somebody who could be, you say the wrong thing and then he flies off the handle. I mean, Donald Trump with his finger on the nuclear codes is kind of a scary thing. Who knows how Donald Trump is going to react to Kim Jong-un over time. He just recently, went through President Xi or Xi or Xi, whatever, in China to exert his influence upon them to rein in North Korea, to try to get them to, act more in line with the global culture, but to no avail. And so we see this student, Otto Warmbier, who comes over to North Korea. And by the way, you can't travel to North Korea out of America. He got into North Korea through a travel company in Beijing. And so up until this past week, Americans could travel through Beijing and come into North Korea through a travel agency. The State Department has issued a dire warning against Americans not to go into North Korea, and why anybody would want to go into North Korea is beyond me. But he goes into the country through the travel agency, and on the last day or something, he goes into a service area of the hotel and tries to take down a sign, just something hanging on the wall for keepsake, and something that frat guys have been doing for years, just taking a sign off the wall for giggles or whatever with their friends. Hey, look what I got! And he is captured on the plane as they are about to return to actually Beijing or wherever the travel agency was passed through, and got arrested right as the plane was about to take off. So I'll continue this discussion when I come back from the break. Fascinating, how North Korea differs from the American culture. I want to talk a little bit about some of the responses that we saw this past week from some people in the media to this situation, how abhorrent some of the comments were, and how it's showing the political divide within this own country. But at the same time, we should be, so blessed to see the type of culture that we have versus what's going on inside North Korea. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back from the break. You're listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business.
Hi, welcome to Yeager's. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeager's, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring type products: hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
Welcome back to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes the show business. Today, I'm taking some time to talk about the recent issue in the news related to the return of Otto Warmbier, the student who had went to North Korea through a travel agency out of Beijing, only to return to our country dead this past week. And so he goes into the country, he's there as a tourist, takes a sign off the wall, and is arrested on the plane as they're about to leave Pyongyang. He is then forced into this statement admitting his guilt, which was obviously a contrived situation, you know, bawling his eyes out, scared to death. And within 1 hour, that's how long the trial lasted for him, he was sentenced to 15 years hard labor. And in North Korea, hard labor actually means what it says it means. It means you are going to, you know, reside in a prison. You're going to be doing physical work under, you know, adverse conditions. And honestly, you know, we don't know a whole lot about what goes on inside of those prisons. From the moment that he went into custody and we saw the trial, not a whole lot more was heard from him. As a matter of fact, we were just simply told he was fine, nothing to worry about, and you'll see him in 15 years, I guess. And strangely enough, and it was kind of interesting, the timing of it, I think it's probably just coincidental. We see Dennis Rodman going over to North Korea, and then the next day, we see Otto Warmbier is being released. So my first thought was, did Rodman get him released? But those two were unrelated. Dennis Rodman was traveling to North Korea, and I guess he went over there and actually made the trip in an effort to bring sports to the country. You may have heard several years ago he traveled with a team of professional basketball players over to North Korea and played a basketball game for the birthday of Kim Jong-un. Even sang happy birthday to this dictator, which created a tremendous amount of backlash for the basketball star, and even led him to issue an apology even after he put up a tremendous a fight on his end about why what he was doing was worthy, and how, you know, so many in America didn't fully understand the situation, and how he was, you know, on the forefront of trying to open up a dialogue with the country. But I don't think he fully understood what was happening inside North Korea. Kim Jong-un, the leader, strangely enough, was schooled in Sweden, they believe, became a big basketball fan, and loves the sport, and so somehow got in touch with Dennis Rodman and invited his entourage to the country. But you know, it's Dennis Rodman's desire to bring more sports to the country. North Korea, you know, has, you know, a basketball team, and I guess a basketball league there that plays. It was interesting to watch the game, which is available on YouTube. You can watch that there. Watching them play the game, a traditional basketball game, as people up in the stands screaming, cheering. In North Korea, they're all seated as if they're, you know, watching you know, an orchestra play or something. It was complete silence. There was no cheering. The occasional hand claps when somebody did something well or would made a shot, but it was an eerie, it's just an overall eerie environment over in North Korea. Just even something to us we take for granted, like car ownership. Car ownership in North Korea is strictly for the privileged few. And so for the videos that come out of North Korea, you see these, you know, major metropolis, you know, Pyongyang, which is the capital of the country, but yet you see an occasional car go down the streets inside of the urban areas, and you see these just wide open streets with no cars, and this eerie, just, you know, silence. And then in other areas of the country, you'll hear this eerie background music, which is propaganda music for the country. Some of the tourists who have been to the country, you know, there's videos of that available on YouTube where they awake and outside is playing this propaganda music. It's just this brainwashing that this country has on this culture, in which, you know, information is completely controlled coming into and going out of this country. The internet over there is a state-controlled internet. I think they have access to about 50 sites or something, they said. Completely state control. There is no actual external connection to the internet. through North Korea. The media in North Korea is completely state-run. No media is issued without approval from the state. Very scary situation, and very scary leader and cult line that has taken control of this country. Kim Jong-un, when he came to power, it was even it's rumored, I don't even think it's really rumored, I think it's fact, but he killed his uncle, who was a top influencer within the government, and an older gentleman, the brother of his father. And then Kim Jong-un, who was next in line to take control of the government, had him killed because of some differences in political beliefs. But not only did he have him killed, he had him fed to a pack of wild dogs, is the story, and killed alive by dogs. A very unforgiving individual. And so we see Dennis Rodman going over to this country and making friends with this individual while people are starving and while he lives a life of luxury. Also, we see in North Korea that Kim Jong-un just invested, hundreds of millions of dollars into a ski resort that looks to be very nice, but with nobody skiing except the occasional few. And I think it's something he probably built for his upper privileged class and himself. Again, all while his people continue to starve. And in North Korea, you can be put to death for anything anti-state, anything. There is no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of expression. There is no freedom of religion. The religion in North Korea is that Kim Jong-un and the Kim family, the Kim dynasty, is the gods. They are the ones that you should worship. And ironically enough, when Kim Il-sung, the original leader of this new cult of personality, came to power, they started their calendar over. They're now in year, what is it, year 80 something or whatever, since 55 or whatever, since he came into power. They're not even on the same calendar in the same year. They started their calendar to coincide with Kim Il-sung, the same way that the new calendar started over, at the New Testament and Jesus Christ with our modern day calendar. That's how they view that cult of personality over there. So Dennis Rodman goes over to the country a couple of weeks ago. Otto Warmbier comes back in a coma and then dies the next day. The story out of North Korea was he developed botulism and was given a sleeping pill and never woke up from it. Highly unlikely. I don't think anybody believes that. And if that truly were the case, why did they not seek out adequate medical care for him immediately upon the affliction, which they said happened the day after his conviction inside of their court system. Obviously, he was beaten, suffered a severe brain injury, which left him in a coma, and we're still waiting to hear the results of the autopsy that says, really what happened to this poor young man coming back out of North Korea for doing nothing more than taking a sign off the wall, which that in and of itself is disputed. His roommate said he saw nothing like that, so he doesn't even know if that even happened. But he was, captured, and who knows, was to be made an example of inside of North Korea, or maybe to use it as a bargaining chip. North Korea has detained Americans at several times throughout the year. There's 3 other Americans right now that are being detained inside North Korea, and they're bargaining chips, and that's what I thought would happen with Otto Warmbier too. He'd be over there for several months to a year. Some political issue would come up, and then the president would negotiate a release. Bill Clinton had some success with negotiating with Kim Jong-il in the 90s for release of political prisoners over in North Korea. But today there is just no dialogue between our country and North Korea. And some of the things that came out of the media were just abhorrent, especially on the left, who were, saying things like Otto learned his lesson that white privilege doesn't apply in all cultures, or he should have respected the cultures and the ideology of another country and not been such a frat boy, or lines like that. Horrible statements. These are the same people that are probably going to stand by our criminal justice system and stand by the amendment that states no cruel and unusual punishment. Well, that's cruel and unusual punishment in North Korea. And so for people issuing those types of statements, it's not logical to what we have here in the United States. don't take our freedom for granted either. Our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, our freedom of expression. Look at what it can turn into in the hands of the wrong leader. And that's what's happened in North Korea, and a very scary regime and a very scary end will ultimately come to this regime. And it'll be interesting to see the number of psychiatrists and psychologists that are going to be required to treat the people in that country when that regime finally does fall. You know, they're so brainwashed, and I wonder how many of them truly believe in the regime. I wonder how many of them truly know that the guy is a nut, but they're living in a state of fear, and how many people just don't care. But I think that so many of those people are, you know, affected in such a negative way that when the Kim regime finally does fall, there'll be a number of people that'll probably kill themselves because they were that devout to the leader, especially in the military. There's a very powerful military, and then there's going to be many who, you know that they're living in a state of fear, and there will be some that will learn to acclimate to society. But right now, unfortunately, it seems like we'll eventually end up in some type of military infraction with the country. Ultimately, though, Kim Jong-un just needs to die, and whether we can get him out of there, you know, through a covert operation with special forces and topple that regime and let the people take back over. But they've got to get the man out of power before he causes severe damage to the entire area and to our allies, such as South Korea, such as Japan, and begins to impact and be able to affect the western coast of the United States. So again, just some political commentary on an issue that occurred this past week. Stay out of North Korea. It's now the travel companies aren't letting Americans go into North Korea anyways as a result of that, which is a good thing. There's no need for Americans outside of our political and our press to be inside of that country right now. So again, you've been listening to That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where business becomes show business.